They actually call it a privilege tax in California. That's what the Secretary of State's office calls it. And it's really for the so-called privilege of doing business here in California. It is more than double what any other state charges.
Brian Kaye for CalWatchdog.com, here with Pete Peterson, candidate for California Secretary of State. Now, Pete, before I ask you why you're running for Secretary of State, what exactly does the Secretary of State do?
Yeah, so the Secretary of State is not out signing peace treaties with Utah. I think it's very important that we get that on the table. The two major responsibilities that the office undertakes is one, they're the Chief Elections Officer for California, so they oversee and qualify all ballot measures, they certify all elections, they produce that ballot information packet that we get that's supposed to inform us as voters. The other side of the office, and this is something that many of the small business owners understand, is they're the chief business registrar. So when you start up your business in California, you register with the Secretary of State, and as far too many businesses are doing, when they leave the state of California, they file their papers of dissolution, and there are numerous paperwork types of filings that happen with that same office.
So why are you running? Why do you think you're qualified to be the Secretary of State?
Well, it's really my day job. For the better part of the last decade, I have headed up a policy institute at Pepperdine. The name of it is the Davenport Institute for Public Engagement. And the work I do around the state has been training and consulting with government officials to do two things they're not very good at. Number one is to make them more transparent in the work that these governments do, but also to make them more responsive to their citizens. And it's been through that work that I actually got to know our current Secretary of State about 5 or 6 years ago, but I also got to meet and know other secretaries of state in other states. And really what I saw in that difference was that other secretaries of state see their job in a very nonpartisan way. It's their responsibility to make sure voters are informed and involved. And in many ways, the work I've been doing around the state has been making sure that citizens are better involved and informed. So this step for me, to me, was really a logical step in trying to continue the work I've been doing at a more local level and taking it to a state level.
And implementing it, I guess, at the state level too.
Yeah.
So if there were three things that you needed to see done today, or we needed to see done today as a state at the Secretary of State's office, what would those three things be?
Well, first we need to look at election administration. The nonpartisan Pew Center on the states recently ranked us as 49th out of 50 states in how we conduct elections here. And so
What does that mean in terms of conduct elections?
So 15 different criteria, everything from how we maintain our voter rolls to how we engage our military serving overseas. We are 49th out of 50 states. And so the primary jobs of the next Secretary of State is, number one, to oversee our transition from a county-by-county voter roll system to a statewide centralized system.
So when you say county-by-county voter roll system, that means that each county manages the list of voters who are registered in that county, and there's no centralized list in Sacramento.
Right, and the reason that's important is we're the last state in America not to do that. That's actually a federal mandate. That following the Bush-Gore election back in 2000, federal legislation was passed 12 years ago that mandated that every state was going to have to move from a county-by-county system to a centralized statewide voter database. We still don't have one of those in California.
And why is that important?
Well, because it relates directly to the quality of our voter rolls. Again, the nonpartisan Pew Center, in looking at California's system of going county by county, estimated that we have 1 million out-of-date voter files just in California, because there's a wide variance in quality as to how Orange County keeps its voter rolls versus, say, another county. So moving to a statewide voter database allows us to compare and contrast people moving between counties and in-state and out-of-state. So it's very important as it relates to ballot integrity. But what other states are finding as well, it actually saves money, because when they move to a statewide voter database, they're not mailing out their absentee ballots to voters who no longer live in their state. And we could be saving hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars with a better, more legitimate voter database.
Okay, so that's number one. What's number two?
We need to do a much better job of business engagement. So we need to transition to an online business registration system. As the business owners in the audience probably know, you can't actually register your business online in California as you can in other states. There's actually been, in some instances, a 6 to 8 week backlog at the Secretary of State's office when businesses look to register. So we need to transition that to an online database. We also need to fight to reduce the annual $800 a year business franchise tax, which in California is far more than what any other state charges. And I've made it a significant part of my platform to make it easier and cheaper to start a business.
So this
here.
is an $800 fee that you pay to start a business, and it's ongoing, or it's a one-time fee?
No, it's an annual fee.
Just for the pleasure of doing business in the
Well,
state
and
of
actually
California.
that's what they call it. They actually call it a privilege tax in California. That's what the Secretary of State's office calls it. And it's really for the so-called privilege of doing business here in California. It is more than double what any other state charges. And I've promised to bring both transparency to where that money goes.
What do people say in terms of defending that, being it's twice as much as any other state, or even that it exists?
Well, I think most people don't know how much more it is than any other state. When I get out on the campaign trail and let folks know that many states don't even charge an annual tax for the so-called privilege of doing business. And even some states like a Delaware, for example, which does a much better job of registering business. They're kind of the incorporation kings of the United States. They only charge about $350 a year. So in part, it's making people aware how outsized that tax is. But believe me, when I speak to business owners, especially those at the lower socioeconomic rungs of the ladder, they know firsthand how difficult that tax is to bear.
Sure. Now, going back for a minute, you said that businesses cannot register online. So
Yeah.
you can't start your business and say, I want to register with the state online.
Right.
At all.
No, you can't. And so one of the things I talk about, and I meet with CPAs and attorneys that in many ways facilitate the process of business startups.
Wait, but, how does that work then? Because I thought that are there online services that you can buy that would do it outside of the Secretary of State's office?
There
I always
are
thought
some of
that
those. There are some of those, but for those you have to pay a fee to accomplish.
to a private
Right.
company that does the work for you,
Right.
essentially in person.
Right.
Okay.
So I had a friend of mine who's a CPA here in the Los Angeles area tell me that when a client comes to him looking to start a business in California, he starts the paperwork with Sacramento to register the business, and then he goes online with the Nevada Secretary of State just so the client can register a business and open a business checking account that same day. So other states are really doing a much better job at the front end of the business relationship of making it easier to start a business. And I've pledged, especially for our smallest businesses, to make that an easier, more intuitive process.